Hi, my name is Alex Calderon. I'm going to share a little bit with you about myself. I appreciate the time that you're taking to watch this video. It really means a lot for me um, to have my video posted here in this YouTube channel in the Keys to Life. Um, I didn't always feel like my voice mattered and like I've always existed or that I even had a purpose, and being able to share my experience, my life, a little bit of it and with the intention that it serves others, um, that gives me a great sense of purpose and passion, definitely. Um, so this means a lot to me, and I appreciate you taking your time to get to know me a little. As I said, um, I grew up in Los Angeles, in a immigrant community. It was 3 or 4 blocks of apartments, and it was a very particular neighborhood in Glassell Park because we were surrounded by family. I had cousins, aunts, and uncles living in the same street, sometimes in the same apartment, like 3 or 4 of us, and it was very common for families. And at that time, a lot of people immigrated from a certain part of Mexico and a certain even region, and so a lot of people were familiar with each other. Very popular neighborhood, and it was very lively. With that came that liveliness of infusion of immigrants, and immigrants were very familiar with each other. This very populated, condensed area. I got to see a lot of things, experience a lot of things, and not just my environment, but also my experience at home and the parents that I had. I can remember the earliest memory that I have of that I could say was when the pain or the trauma began. I was like 3 years old when my mother burned my hands. My mother burned my hands. I was 3 years old. I had stolen some money, took some money without permission to buy a mango, and the mango lady who was selling the mangoes all chopped up with chili and limon. She went to I didn't know what $100 was. I just knew they gave her this money and she'll give me a mango. I gave her the money, she gave the mango. I gave her the money, I had the mango, she took off. I took off. She's like, hey, el cambio. I'm like, nah, it's all good. Man, I took off. She's gonna tell my mom, hey, she knew who I was. She knew. Told my mom, hey, your son gave me this $100 bill and you ain't got any change. I'm like, what? So, yeah, my mom knew that I took the dollar bill from somewhere, and she began, beating me with the belt at first, and then she dragged me into the apartment, and while I was in the apartment, began hitting me even more, and once I was in the apartment, she turned the stove on, and and just placed my body with her body up against the stove, and the flames were on, and she grabbed my hands and just pressed them down on the stove, and I don't know, she burned my hands. My own mother burned my hands. I was just 3 years old, and my own mother burned my hands. And I can remember it. I don't even have to close my eyes. I can remember it. Um, I can smell it. My hands burn. So after my mother burned my hands, I guess the long-term effect of that was that the confusion, the pain that came along. Here's this woman who I love and who loves me, supposed to protect me, who I love, my mother, that's all I know. Just a child. Hurts me severely, physically, and emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And that was the beginning of abuse that I would experience from my mother. That's the only time that she ever burned my hands, and she would go on to be very abusive physically. What I did to deserve her physical abuse, I can tell you, maybe I broke a window, and that justified pulling out an extension cord to whip me with it. And, maybe I broke a plate because I was running around the house or some shit. I'm sorry, excuse me. And, that was good enough to whip me with a clothing hanger or something. My father was the same way. I had accidents, like I broke my arm and my father whipped me with a broken arm. I was running one day playing around these apartments, and I tripped and fell, and my knee hit this pipe that was exposed by the apartment, and he whipped me. My knees, I had to get stitches on this, it was like this big gush on my knee. He's beating on me. And yeah, my father was also very abusive. And that was one thing, that I had to deal with. It's so many different layers that I've experienced, and I know many other people have experienced. The relationship with my mother, who tended to be abusive, and my father, his discipline. This is all disciplinary abuse, right? I think it's very common in Mexican culture, and we just pass it off just as culture. The emotional detachment from my father, not really being present, or loving, kind, or affectionate, having to deal with this machismo, being told not to cry, share your expressions or your emotions. There's so many different layers of it. That opened a window for as a young boy, I really wanted some affection. Maybe it was just me, personal to me, to my being, my own spirit, that I needed as a boy to be paid more love and attention to, and not hit and beat as I was being hit and beat. I didn't want that anymore, even if I was getting in trouble or did things to get in trouble, whatever. I just opened up the door for like a predator, a pedophile. who preyed, on my vulnerabilities, on my need to want to be loved and cared and have affection by an older man, by a father figure. And when I didn't have that, that allowed for this predator to essentially provide me with those things, the love and affection and care of a father. And I'd experienced sexual abuse for some years as a child, and adolescent into my early teens. And that comes with a whole different layer to add on to the pain and hurt that I had already experienced. It's so common that many of us experience. And for those of you who have experienced it, it's okay. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. So, a lot of shame, and a lot of guilt that comes with it, but it's not your fault, and it's not your shame or guilt to carry. So, it's a lot of work. I continue to work on that myself. So I had all these different experiences, I was around gangs, I had cousins already involved in gangs, and was part of the community I grew up in. And added on to my personal trauma was community trauma, right? The drugs, the addiction, the homelessness, the gambling, the violence, the guns. I grew up in that environment, because that's all my family could afford at the time, right? And I grew up with the harassment of seeing the police violence as well. I think it's time we acknowledge a lot of that as well, at the forefront of how traumatizing is it to also feel very hopeless that there's a greater enemy out there with the bags and a gun. So that's also part of the traumatizing experience. But I grew up in the same environment, and my outlet is all the pain that I already experienced at home and other places in my life. I was hurt. I was a hurt kid. And gangbanging just provided me an outlet. I was so broken. That the truth is that I was so broken that I was willing to sacrifice, whatever value that I didn't have for my life at that time for just a bit of comfort, acceptance, love, and admiration. I was willing to make that trade. That's how broken I was. And I had come from that, I had experienced that. And so I chose gangbanging, or my association with it as an outlet for my anger and my pain. And then within gangs, I discovered even more of myself, and what I had been experiencing was hiding in violence. I got trying out different drugs with the homies, and pretty much have tried everything but smoking crack. And addiction, I don't. It's not the drug for me. It's the issues. It's been myself, what I have been experiencing, and I having to admit that I was trying to hide. I couldn't be sober. Couldn't be here, present, because there was so much pain that I wasn't addressing. So I dealt with addiction for many years on and off, and when I was able to, even when I was incarcerated, I dealt with addiction. But I'm sober, and I've been sober now about 5 years now, 6 years I think. I stopped counting. I've been sober for a very long time, and so that's the awesome part. When I started gangbanging, I made that exchange. I began committing crimes and finding myself and hurting people in my neighborhood and causing more trauma in my neighborhood, my own people. I found myself caught up in the politics of the streets and the cultures and the greater environment of what it was like we were a part of. I began giving up whatever of myself to a system. I allowed my life to be worth almost nothing, and that's what being locked up is, what you're treated as. I had lost sight and all value of it, and that sucks. That sucks, because we're awesome people. We're great people. And I had to do a lot of discovering later on. Spent my time in Dewey, camp, placements, and YA, county jail, finally to prison. I probably spent more time incarcerated than I ever had spent out in real world. That's probably facts. I think I spent more than, I'm 36 years old. I'm going to be 36 next week, and I've spent more time incarcerated than I have outside. I was incarcerated for 12 years, from the time that I was 19 up until like I was 32 or something. The iPhone, I just missed so much of my life. And even before that, being in and out of the halls, having done 2 years, 1 year, or whatever, that adds up a lot of my life that I missed out, a lot of birthdays and stuff I didn't know how to recognize and value my life and appreciate the things that I had. I took that off for granted as a game, but also, my mind, I think the one thing that I understand now is that I'd given up my mind and my thoughts to completely to this life, that I had lost value, that I had given up, that I had given myself in to this system. It took a buck for me to see this. This last time was the most time that I ever got. 12 years and 8 months or 10 months in prison. A long portion of my life I was missing out on, and it took for me to recognize that it was my thoughts that had caused me to make a lot of choices that I had made, that I was programmed to believe a lot of things about myself that were not true. Um, that I myself had fed these things to me, and my mind began shifting, and I began working on that, and it was understanding my thoughts, my voice. Um, the Four Agreements by Domingo Reese. It was this book that made me look at my thoughts and my words. The first agreement: be impeccable with your word. And I started thinking about what I'd been feeding my mind. And what I'd been feeding my mind was very negative things about life, about other people, about myself. And when I grew to understand that and really apply these practices, because there are four agreements that we make to be impeccable with that word, not take anything personally, never make assumptions, and always do your best. And there's more to those agreements, and I highly recommend the book to anyone who's watching this and may be curious what's the foundation to my everyday practice, and they continue to be. I've experienced a lot. I'm not gonna give you the horror stories anymore. You know, I've experienced a lot, you know, in the streets, in prison, and life is greater than that, you know. Life is much more better than we have made it out to be. And granted, I understand our difficulties and our circumstances and what we're trying to overcome, but we could overcome a lot of this with love, self-love, loving others, loving ourselves first. And so if we can try to practice that a little bit more with ourselves and others, and understand that love is such a huge thing. It involves kindness, vulnerability, honesty, trust, loyalty, forgiveness, encouragement, tenderness. Love is such a huge thing, and to practice it again is such a huge practice. But if we could remember ourselves as when we were kids, just a little boy or a little girl, before the world came and began programming our mind, let's reprogram it and think about myself and how I program my mind. Love is huge. Love is everything. Love will help change us all, change ourselves, be better, more love.